Only seconds to spare.
Okay. 30 seconds.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Free Thought Forum presented by the Pennsylvania Non-Believers. I'll be your host for tonight, Jacob, and once again I'm joined by Doug.
Greetings, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
And we got a lot of miscellaneous things to talk about. It's been about a month since we've been at a live show, but I hope everyone had a nice holiday. Mine, I think, went okay. I avoided fights with the family, mostly by biting my tongue. I don't know if you had that same issue or not.
No, I try to bite my tongue wherever possible because my tongue gets me in trouble.
Yeah. I really, really wanted to avoid that through Christmas, but anyway, well, and this is our first episode of the new year, so we'll be looking ahead a little bit. We've got hopefully an eventful year coming up. Our first event we usually do in the year are the St. Patrick's Day parades, which we don't have all the information on those yet, but we will be planning those again to show our support for the atheists in Ireland and draw attention to the blasphemy laws that still exist in Ireland, as well as various other church-state separation. Well, I should say lack thereof in Ireland. And if you want to find out more about Ireland atheists, the website to go to is atheist.ie. And I can only imagine what they go through there. There's all sorts of reports about how things like sometimes the only option for school for children is a Catholic school, and that's already a bit problematic in the United States in certain places, especially when, let's say, you only have access to a Catholic hospital. Yeah. And there's certain services you need that women want to get that they can't at a Catholic hospital.
Well, it also depends upon where you live, too.
Yeah, it always does. So it's really important that, to recognize that these things do go on in more civilized Western countries as well. So, again, that's coming up. We'll need marchers for the parade, but hopefully there'll be some emails sent out about how to sign up for that. Also, this year we will not be having our annual conference, mainly due to the Reason Rally, which will be held on June 4th in Washington, D.C. And that's going to be, there's a lot of organizations putting a lot of emphasis on this year. I found out actually that we're not the only state to be canceling our state level conference.
Oh, is that right?
No, I heard there's a few states along the East Coast that the organizations that usually run an annual conference are not running a conference to put more support behind the Reason Rally to make sure people can go to it.
That shows really some solidarity there and cooperation.
Yeah, and that was really the big thing about the first Reason Rally that I heard David Silverman talking about it a couple times, where a lot of times like atheist organizations might not really get along with each other. Mm-hmm. But the great thing about the Reason Rally, the first one, which was held I think 4 years ago, was it was the first time that all the atheist organizations just sort of got together and did one thing, did something together. and that's the whole point of it, is to show unity, and it's really an opportunity to stand up and be counted. And especially it's really important during in a presidential election year when, pretty much every candidate feels like they have to play lip service to Christianity.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Well,
Yeah.
As a comment,
Yeah.
I'll add here, voice from above.
Right.
The magazine American Atheist, the title or the cover said, "Why Atheists Must Vote."
Right.
It showed a nice picture of Donald Trump holding a Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing, and actually, and you also have people like Ted Cruz getting in the polls, which is disturbing. But I mean, we're not really out there to endorse any particular candidate, but it's more like not wanting to get the people who are obviously going to be letting their religion influence their decision making, and it's especially critical this year because the Supreme Court's not getting any younger.
yeah.
And that's I think, I'm less concerned about what the president is actually going to do about various things. The most concerning thing for me is who are they going to support? Who's that president going to appoint to the Supreme Court? Especially if the next president is a two-term president, they could easily be replacing half the Supreme Court depending on how things go. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but it's certainly a possibility. And all sorts of big decisions are on the table whenever you're replacing that much of the Supreme Court. Some people were saying, even something like Roe v. Wade might be back on the table, and same-sex marriage. You've got everybody. The people who oppose it are digging in for a second wave assault, and
Or they're going to throw away the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Obamacare.
right. Nobody can talk tonight. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so there's so many critical decisions that they have to make that are going to be in the issue, and that's one thing I kind of look at. Last year's Pennsylvania state election was a pretty terrible turnout, which to me was a little bit aggravating because there were quite a few judges up for election last year. So which are again very, very important. They can have a tremendous impact excuse me, on really maintaining the constitutionality of laws, to make sure that the people who are using their office to push religion on others aren't able to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, don't forget that yes, they are supposedly enforcing the Constitution values. They are enforcing the law, but you still can't throw away their personal opinions and their personal viewpoints on it.
Oh yeah, and
You kind of have to make sure that you know who the heck you're putting in office.
well, I mean, just look at Alabama. Justice Roy Moore a couple years ago got thrown off the bench for numerous ethics violations, and the next election he got voted right back on.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's told all the lower level judges to stop issuing same-sex marriage licenses because apparently there's some confusion about whether or not the judges should obey the Supreme Court decision or the contradictory Alabama court decision. And I'm like, I don't believe Roy Moore for a second that there's actually confusion there. But even if there is, that's kind of a bad sign that you don't know which court to go by. It's like, how do you not know the Supreme Court holds precedence over you? And so yeah, that's why these votes and these votes are so important, especially when they're they're going to be people. Whether you're either electing a judge or electing a president who's going to be appointing a judge. And that's why that's coming back to the Reason Rally. That's why this is so important, is to show show that there is a significant portion of the population who aren't religious who do vote, and you're going to have to make sure you don't alienate us in the process of your campaign. And that's why there's so many people just so many organizations are throwing all their support behind it this year. And again, that's on June 4th, and hopefully, I think the turnout at the last one was somewhere between 20 and 30,000, despite being in the rain. So I think if we can get a good day this year, and the atheist movement has definitely grown significantly since. I mean, I wasn't even identifying as an atheist at the first one, well, during the first one. Although I was definitely on my way there. Yeah, it was, 2012 was kind of an interesting year for me, but that's the story for another time. But but hopefully we'll see a much larger turnout, and definitely hopefully send a strong message. And I should point out another reason that we're not going to have the conference this year is the FFRF will be holding its national conference in October in Pittsburgh. So I don't know. We don't have much information on that yet. But we will be relaying that as we get closer to the event.
And that's the Freedom From Religion Foundation.
Yes, the Freedom From Religion. But moving on, a couple of the big things happened. Couple of big fundraisers happened in December that I wanted to talk about a little bit. The first was the Secular Student Alliance, the Student Alliance fundraiser that was put on by Dogma Debate, which, if you were here last year, they actually held a live showing at Lebanon Valley College, which was a lot of fun to go to. But they held a 24-hour broadcast to raise money for the Secular Student Alliance, and their original goal was $40,000. And because the Secular Student Alliance needed a lot of money, they were unable to keep up with some of the demand, and they went forth with a $40,000 campaign. Well, a gentleman by the name of Todd Seifel decided to make it a little interesting. He about an hour into the show, he tells them to up their goal to $50,000, and if they met that goal, he would match the donation.
Whoa!
So yeah. And in the last half hour, they were able to meet that $50,000 goal.
Wow, that's some jump.
Yeah, so they raised that broadcast raised $100,000 for the Secular Student Alliance, which is incredible. It was watching the atheist community pull that off, and David Smalley was saying the host of Dogma Debate was saying last year they were trying to raise, I think it was $10,000 or $20,000 for Foundation Beyond Belief, and I think they were able to do it, but it was it was a little bit harder for them to do it. This year they raised $100,000. Well, a lot of it thanks to Todd Stiefel, but still, that's still $50,000 coming from the viewers. And they said it was interesting because they had fewer viewers this year than last year, but they still got more donations.
I think that more people are worried about the Student Alliance, because really that's where the future of religion lies. People today, excuse me, they look to all the old people that are Bible indoctrinated.
Right.
But it's the younger students now that are asking the sensible questions and putting forth their ideas, which is usually contrary to what the church says.
Right, and plus it's not only that, it's also the future of the leaders in the movement. Like, being able to give people the leadership experience that is needed for, say, when they get out of college and maybe want to keep going with the movement. We need younger leaders and newer ideas. And I should say, like, I kind of noticed this myself when I went to a different activist group recently, and I noticed there was just like a lot of people arguing with each other, not really sure what to do. And I feel like as a younger person I have a lot of ideas, I have a lot I can contribute to that group. So it's I take it on as a personal challenge to improve that group. And I think a lot of people, and I think there's sort of like the atheist movement is still sort of like you have the older generation might feel a little bogged down, where you get a younger group in there with fresh ideas and able to push things forward. And that's what a lot of what the Secular Student Alliance is about. And it's also there and they also do a lot of the Secular Student Alliance is also very open to religious people as well. There are a lot of religious students that do attend Secular Student Alliance meetings, and they do engage in a lot of open discussion, open forums on various topics. In fact, I read an article on the Secular Student Alliance website where they were saying one group was kind of laughing because they now finally have more atheists in the group than religious people. Because it's not just about promoting atheism either. It's about secular values, a secular government, and I think ultimately sometimes it's more about wanting a more secular government than than just making atheists.
And critical thinking. It's all about critical thinking.
Right.
And,
that too.
And reason.
Right, and that's the kind of thing, and that's why we really a lot of people are really wanted to get behind the Secular Student Alliance. And and the great thing about with all this money raised, it's not like it's one of those nonprofits where it seems like most of the costs are going to say administration or to fight a lawsuit or something like that. Mm-hmm. A lot of this is going right back out into the field work that they do, working, I should say, getting startup kits for the new organizations trying to get started, getting tables and supplies and things so that the Secular Student Alliance the local chapters of the Secular Student Alliance can really get going with their activism in their area.
Yeah.
And also, I should also note the student membership for the Secular Student Alliance is completely free. They don't charge students for membership. It's very donation driven. And because college students, you're broke basically.
Yeah.
So it's.
But all the time, even if you're working two jobs.
Yeah. I had to work 30 hours a week while going to college, and that was not fun. But yeah, so they were able to do a lot of good for the movement, and we definitely can't thank Todd Stiefel enough. He's definitely contributed a lot of funds to the atheist movement, and he has a way. I think one thing that's really good what he does is I think he really does a good job of finding a good cause and putting the dollars he puts towards the movement to the best possible work. And what I mean by that is, like, one of the other things he put up money for a couple years ago was I heard Jerry DeWitt talking about this, where they had a secular service in Louisiana. I think it was actually in the capital, and Todd Stiefel put up the money for it. And we used that. With that money, the the event actually was covered in the New York Times.
No, that's
Yeah, so
nice advertising.
yeah, so it's like, so he was like, so Jerry, as you know, Jerry DeWitt said, so for I think it was like the whole event cost about $7,000. They said so for $7,000 we bought coverage in the New York Times. So I'm like that's a pretty good value. And that's one thing it's about, you know, that the when we talk about the money we put out, many of these organizations are pretty good about putting the money where it's going to do the most good.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just about throwing money at the cause. It's you know, they do as much as they can to stretch every dollar as far as they can.
You know, I would like to point out that at this particular time in history, that the Powerball lottery at the highest amount, ever. And these, I guess they say that they expect it to reach $1.6 billion. Which I say, okay, fine. Now, if I should win that, you can expect to see a lot more billboards from PA non-believers, because they would get a sizable donation for advertising from me. And what the heck? I mean, I'm not going to miss a few $1 million if I've got 1.3 billion.
Yeah.
So I can afford to be generous.
Yeah, I think if I won the Powerball, you would see a lot of atheist organizations getting a lot of money.
Now, Doug, you know
Yeah.
you have to pay taxes on that and everything. You wouldn't get any more than $525 million.
No, they say it's 600 million, but
taxes.
I
Yeah,
can
there's
get
always
by.
taxes. Well, I mean, I'd say I'd go to I'd put it towards atheist organizations, although if I won that much money, I'd probably maybe convert to religion. I don't know.
Yeah.
Unless actually no, I'd have to hand over my soul to Satan, you know, to win it. But anyway, but one other fundraiser that went on over the holiday season was for Sarah Moorhead. One of her, I should say, her husband was actually arrested for molesting one of their children.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation for her to be in, and she has really put a lot of effort into the atheist movement. She was our keynote speaker at the last year's conference. She's the Recovering from Religion executive director. She was the 2013 American Atheist of the Year. You know, she's done just so much work for the atheist movement, and a lot of, especially behind the scenes. You know, a lot of people don't get to see, you know, how much she has done. I don't think she's nearly as famous as she should be, as far as the atheist movement goes.
Many deserving people don't get the credit that they do deserve.
Right, and so it's really so there was a fund drive to help her get through this time, and it actually raised $23,000 for her, which I think was a pretty impressive amount for, you know, it wasn't, you know, it was mostly just through social media, you know, getting the word out about it to for anyone who wanted to help out. And it was quite a few donations came in to $23,000 I think would get you at least through most of the year, hopefully, depending on how many bills she has. But it's hopefully she'll get some continued support, because I don't know if, you know, I really hate to see it to happen to her, because again she is a very important and given a lot of her time to the atheist movement. It's one of those times it's like it's time for us to give back to her.
But then again, too, don't forget that a lot of people, regardless of how much good that she has done or is doing, are just going to automatically hate her because she's associated with atheism.
Right.
You can't get away from it.
Yeah, there's always that. And one thing that was, I was hearing her story of her exit from religion. It was really an interesting story because I think she said one of the things that surprises everybody about her exit from religion is, it was a very abusive time for her. And the weird part about it that nobody gets is it was actually in a mega church. We don't tend to associate those sorts of things with a mega church. We tend to think of, the Westboro Baptist, like the really small, isolated churches. But one thing she's shown is that stuff actually goes on in mega churches as well, and really brought a lot of exposure to that. But so it's really nice to see her get that much support, and so it was, and it's really good to see the atheist community come together for a couple of really good causes over the last month, and that's, I think, one of the things I've said a couple times that's really good about the growing atheist movement is we're now capable of this sort of thing. We now have the networking to be able to hold fundraisers and be successful and do a lot of good work with it.
It's come a long way, and I guess I could say that it seems like a short period of time, but actually it's been a long, hard struggle for atheism.
Right. I mean, it seems like it was slow moving. I think it's definitely starting to pick up speed. But one other major news story I'd like to talk about was I just found out about this morning, and that is a lawsuit that's been filed to remove "In God We Trust" from money. Now there have been various lawsuits of this in the past, which have tried to challenge it under the Establishment Clause or some other piece of legislation. And sometimes it's very difficult for atheists to file lawsuits because a lot of times we've got them on constitutional grounds, but they always try to poke holes in standing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really weird because sometimes even the judges will admit, yeah, you do have you are right on the Constitution, but you don't have standing to challenge this law, which is always very, very frustrating.
Yeah, because you have to get someone from right there and then to make the complaint, and you can't really file class action lawsuits of this type without.
Well, yeah, but you can depending on how you do it, you can file a class action, but it can be difficult at times. But I think the interesting part about this one is it's actually not being challenged under the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, but rather under the Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, which is kind of a different approach. And I should note it's these acts that have been used to say for example, in the Hobby Lobby decision, where the corporation decided they didn't want to have their insurance carriers have cover contraceptives, and that's actually been on several other occasions where there have been religious organizations suing under the Religious Freedom Restoration Acts so that they won't have to cover some sort of medical expense. Mm-hmm. Because it's a little, these things are a little bit more. I think these things can be a little bit more loosely applied, and I think that's on purpose. Mm-hmm. I almost hate saying Religious Freedom Restoration Acts because that's not really what they are.
No,
that a lot of it can be just trying to get. Have another avenue to impose religion on other people while making it sound like it's somehow religious freedom.
Yeah, and that they are protecting the public and all the religious people out there, against those evil atheists.
Right. Or like, you now have the freedom to impose your religion on other people.
Yeah.
That's what it essentially comes down to. So I'm rather curious to see how this case is going to play out, because it could really might give some legislatures pause for passing more of these such acts, because they're unfortunately gaining popularity. They're passed in a couple states. They're probably going to be passed in various other states, and I would expect to see it kind of creep its way around the country. But if you were to do this and say, okay, this is not allowed by, putting "In God We Trust" on money is not allowed under this act, that would, I think, certainly create some a lot of discussion among the religious.
Just as a point of interest, if ever you go into any store and they hand you back some change, and you look at the money they give you, usually if you see the word God on that bill crossed out, you can pretty much figure that an atheist was in possession of that bill before you. Not all atheists, but some atheists appreciate crossing the thing out,
Right.
God out completely.
I'll occasionally do it too, and people will ask, well, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? And what I say is, I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations where I'm challenging somebody's religious beliefs, and then they'll just pull out a bill and say, see here, see here.
Yeah, what's this? What's this?
Yeah, it's so irritating too. And when I try to explain why that's a horrible argument, they just kind of shut me out and walk away. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, this is supposed to be the sort of trumping point of an argument is like, it's the God we put on our dollar bill. And, it's proof
we're not communist. We're not communist. Those evil communists.
Yeah, and that's what's really why it was put there in the first place. And then of course, when you try to challenge these sorts of laws, like in God we trust on money, when you try to challenge something like that, all of a sudden it's not Christian anymore. Mm-hmm. It's broad, it's inclusive. Maybe even materialism is your God. I have heard that argument, by the way. But they'll make that argument in court to try to keep God engraved in public places.
Yes.
But the second you step outside of court, then all of a sudden, it's Christian. And I can't tell you how irritating that is.
But when I look at any courtroom, inevitably it's got over the top of where the judge is, it says, "In God we trust." And I often thought, now, if I was to be taken to court for something, would I dare say, I object to your sign there because I'm an atheist and I don't trust in God? Or, would I more or less be kissing my case goodbye because now I would be automatically probably prejudicing 75 at least percent of the people there. So, do I keep my mouth shut?
Well,
and
I think Penn Jillette brought up an even more interesting point. If you say in God, having God we trust in a courtroom, then why can't you plead not guilty by reason that God told me to do it?
Yeah.
That's if we're gonna say, if you're gonna say Christian nation and Christians should rule over law, fine, then that should be an acceptable defense. I mean, I don't think it should be an acceptable defense. I think it's whenever people say they do something because God told them to, I'm always a little worried.
Yeah. Yes.
But
what is God saying to you right now, huh?
Right. So it's, and that's why we have to challenge these sorts of things. It's, is because they're used as a talking point. They're used to go a step further on, towards something else that's unconstitutional. So I think the fighting in God we trust and on money is a very worthwhile fight. It's a fight we need to make to take.
But you still have in God we trust on coinage, paper money. I mean that's recyclable. I mean it deteriorates and has to be replaced. But coins are a different thing. Coins are around for a long, long time.
Well, I've heard I've heard some people actually take a grinder to their coins, but I wouldn't go
not
quite
sure
that
I'd
far.
want to go that far.
Yeah,
it's not worth
that seems like a little too much effort. But so that's we'll keep on track of that lawsuit. If you want to keep up to date on it, I would check out Hemet Mehta's blog at the. It's titled "The Friendly Atheist," and I'm sure most activists who are watching this already know that blog. He's probably one of the more popular bloggers, and he's very good at keeping up to date on things, and he's also very good at fact checking. I think he really does a lot in terms of keeping everybody honest, especially keeping his fellow atheists honest.
He doesn't spread rumors without checking everything first.
Right, and I think that's very important. That as we move forward as an organization, that there's a bit of self-policing. But the last thing I want to talk about today is at the beginning of December, a new book was released, and yes, I know everyone knows how much into atheist books I am. But this one is actually by the president of American Atheist, David Silverman, and it's titled "Fighting God." It's a manifesto for activism in America, and it was kind of funny because I actually heard an interview of him recently where he didn't actually like the title "Fighting God." That was actually something his publisher wanted him to. It was the title his publisher wanted. And he was arguing with his publisher about it. And he goes, during one of the arguments, I glanced over at my bookshelf, and there was Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe. Well, the idea is the title presupposes that God exists. And he's like, okay, it wouldn't be the first time. And, even Christopher Hitchens had a book that said that. So, okay, well, we'll accept the title. But, I think it's a really interesting book. It's very aggressive tone, very unapologetic. But I think he still has a lot of good points.
I've never heard Dave Silverman ever be apologetic.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing you kind of need out of an activist like that. It's just, I'm gonna make the unpopular decisions because, they need to be done. And he goes. And I think one thing I like about the book is he really goes right to it. And in the first chapter, he's like, you're an atheist, stop saying otherwise. And he's like, if you're a secular Jew, you're an atheist. If you're an agnostic, you're an atheist. If you don't believe in a God and you hate the word atheist, you're an atheist. Yeah, it's literally, I mean, he gets right to it. And he's like, and one of the things I thought was interesting that he pointed out was he was talking a little bit about the other words and how they're more socially acceptable. So that's why people use them. But he did a little bit of research and found out that why they're socially acceptable is nobody knows what they mean.
Yeah.
Very few people know what a humanist actually is. Or, all these other words. People don't know exactly what they mean, so they don't have an opinion on them. And actually, he's not the first author to say that. I remember Greta Christina in her book, Coming Out Atheist, where she said, be careful about coming out as under a different label, because people may not know what you mean. Like she actually had a story where somebody said they came out as a humanist, but her parents were like, oh, okay. And then a couple months later, they're like, wait, you don't believe in God? It's... That always reminds me of who was it? Sorry, who was that did the stand up letting go of God? Oh, Julia Sweeney, where her parents were like, I know, an atheist. I mean, it was bad enough you didn't believe in God anymore, but you're an atheist. Like there was, yeah, it was a pretty hilarious moment. But and that's the thing. It's like that's one of the things it's important to use these labels correctly because there's a lot of distortion and a lot of people who just don't know what they mean.
Yeah. I wonder when David fights God, whether or not he uses a slingshot.
Yeah, probably.
Really, did I stretch that reference just a little bit?
Right. Yeah. Well, it was. But yeah, it's so. So it starts out the book just like talking about there's no reason for atheists to divide themselves into all these different labels, and he says it's kind of weird because Christians don't divide themselves either. It's like if you're a Catholic, a Protestant, a Mormon, or all these different other things, they all identify as Christian. And which is weird because many of these different denominations and sects have mutually exclusive beliefs. Even though they might believe in Jesus, there's all sorts of other doctrines and stuff that are just completely irreconcilable.
Well, just like Mormons.
Yeah. But or even just between Catholics and Protestants, it's questionable whether you can even call that the same religion at times. But for some reason, when it comes to atheists, we're dividing ourselves, and that's one of the things he was saying is that we've got to stop doing. And of course, another thing he was doing, he also presents his case that hardline activism does work, and he's did a presentation like that a couple years ago when we had a conference in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. Showing the numbers where every time there's a big campaign in atheist activism, we see a rise in the number of atheists. And he showed things like he showed like a big spike in this one period of time. And he said, well, what happened there? That's when you had The God Delusion and Letter to a Christian Nation come out. Mm-hmm. And he goes through point by point, all these different campaigns we can trace to a jump in the number of atheists. And so there he makes his case for that too, is showing he goes, if I thought I was damaging the movement by doing this, I'd stop doing it, but the data says otherwise.
Yeah.
But
well, it's
then he kind of
go ahead.
I was going to say, then he kind of goes into a bit of stop putting religion on a pedestal, how we tend to give religion too much respect over other
opinions.
Yeah, other beliefs that we know to be false. And he also does a bit to justify some of the more unpopular moves he's made, which is I think that's and I'm glad he addressed those because I think things like the 9/11 cross at the 9/11 Memorial Museum, mm-hmm. where they did that lawsuit because it basically tried to Christianize 9/11, and unfortunately it reinforces this whole Christian West versus Middle Eastern Muslim religious war that's going on, and it's not like they wanted it taken down. They just wanted maybe something there for the atheists, and actually they're not the only we're not the only ones to do that. There's also Jews, Hindus, various other religions wanted something there.
Yeah, just you don't have to take your stuff down. Just include our stuff with it, just to show the people there are other things, there are other people besides Christians.
Yeah, there were hundreds of other people of other religions that died on 9/11.
Yeah,
and so that needs to be acknowledged. And I don't think he said this in the book, but I think he said this elsewhere. He said, with the cross, they had it was actually displayed at a church where they collected donations for it for a couple of months. And then when they were putting it at the memorial, they had a big religious service, and where they had a priest come out and consecrate the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have the gall to say that this is somehow secular.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's not right.
Do you really expect me to swallow that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently they wouldn't even put up the symbols of the other religions. I mean, they accepted them, but apparently they're not on display, at least like last I saw. So it's certainly, this is an attempt to Christianize a national tragedy. And and I feel the same way. Like recently in my hometown, they had this, the invocation from the Memorial Day parade had a very Christian prayer to the start of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, thank you, because you realize that numerous veterans in your belief system, numerous of our veterans are going to hell. You believe that, by the way. Think about that. And obviously they don't think about that when they do things like that. But I think it's something you need to point out. Like, look, according to your beliefs, these veterans that you're honoring, a few of them you think are burning in hell right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's and I try not to blame them too much if they don't. A lot of people don't think through their beliefs, but that's, I think, some of the things you need to point out, and why I think we do want to fight against the religion. And one thing that David Silverman kept harping on was, it's not, when they want religious symbols in public, they want a monopoly.
Yes.
And they're not content to say, okay, I want to we got a call. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Yes.
Welcome to Free Thought Forum.
Oh, sorry, wrong number.
That's okay.
Doesn't that just figure?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, if any of you viewers out there watched the last Free Thought Forum, when we didn't have a live show, but we put on a program called American Free Thought that was very well done. If you had any comments you'd like to make about that program, from the Center for Inquiry, give us a call. Let us know if you like the program.
Yeah. But so yeah, it's more or less about when they put monuments in public places. It's about them wanting a monopoly, and we see this a lot whenever they'll put these sort of free speech zones on courthouses, which gives them a loophole to put up a Ten Commandments monument. Then when other people want to put something there too, and all of a sudden it's like,
no, can't do that.
Yeah, that's why I'm really kind of thankful to some of the Satanists out there, because they're a lot more provocative in what they do. Mm-hmm. And it's always fun to watch Christians squirm whenever they start. They're like, oh, we want to put up a satanic monument next to the Ten Commandments, or we want to hand out satanic literature to the school because you're handing out evangelical material.
Which, by the way, our organization is not satanic. We do not believe in Satan. If we do not believe in God, we certainly don't believe in the devil.
Well, I should say it varies by Satanists. There are people who do actually believe in a literal Satan. Some people believe in it as sort of an abstract concept, and other Satanists are just atheists trying to be, provocative.
I use the word atheist very often just for shock value. They say, "What are you?" I'm an atheist.
Right. So that's why it's important to challenge these monuments that are trying to have a monopoly on public spaces. and that's what he really went through a lot of the different lawsuits and different things talking about what exactly their motivation was for doing it. And a lot of it is just, trying to stop putting religion on a pedestal as far as, the way we treat it, and, stop treating it with so much respect. Even after you've left the religion, some people still hold a respect for the religion for some reason. And one of the things he really concluded with was talking about the number of atheists there are, and how there's more atheists than you think. And he's saying there's, even though the people who identify as atheists maybe make up only about 6% of the population, there's probably a lot more than that who actually are, don't believe in God, don't, especially when you get into nominal Christians, like I really was for about a decade. When you get down to it, I was probably an atheist for about 10 years before I actually started to identify as one.
Is that another call? No, I guess not.
No, I think that's the same number. Yeah, that's the same number.
Okay.
So,
Same wrong number.
right. So, and that's why, and that's one of the things he's talking about was many times when we're doing activism, the target isn't deeply entrenched religious people. Oftentimes it's people who are just more or less apathetic towards it, who haven't really given it much thought, but still are supporting these religious organizations.
Or kind of non-believers, but they think that they're alone in the world.
Right. Yeah. There's the closet atheist, and I think, I've said this numerous times in the past, is whenever we're out tabling, the best is when we just keep people coming up to us thanking us for what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's, we really do appreciate that, because, showing the support for other atheists in the country, and or just giving,
Making other people think.
Yeah, and we want to give, and also give something a little bit people to think about. And sometimes when I'm engaging a religious person, it's not about changing their mind so much as it is trying to clear up their misunderstandings. Or because I remember back from, some of the sermons I had to sit through as a kid, were really just total misrepresentations of the godless community. And it's really important that we go out there and clear some of that up. And unfortunately, it's not just from preachers. If you look in popular works of apologetics, it's there's all sorts of just misrepresentations and straw manning of atheists, which gets really, really irritating after a while, especially when some of these apologists, they should know what an atheist is. They should know what it entails. Like, you have someone who, someone like Norman Geisler misrepresenting atheists when when he's been in debates with Christopher Hitchens. Well, I say debates. He say he got slapped around the stage left and right, but but it's like, even these people that know better, or people like William Lane Craig, or I'm like, you've debated how many atheists, yet you're still making that argument, And of course, I have to constantly correct my father on his Hitler arguments. They're getting old. That's getting really, really old.
What atheists really are called trumpeters. Like back in the olden days when the guy with the trumpet used to blow his horn and lead the people into battle. Well, there's an Aesop's fable which I kind of like. It's called the Trumpeter Taken Prisoner, and it goes, a trumpeter bravely leading on the soldiers was captured by the enemy. He cried out to his captors, "Pray spare me, and do not take my life without cause or without inquiry. For I have not slain a single man of your troop. I have no arms to carry, and nothing but this one brass trumpet. To which they replied, "And that is the very reason for which you should be put to death." They said, "For while you do not fight yourself, your trumpet stirs all others to battle." And in a way, this is why religious people want to shut up atheists, because they think that we are stirring other possible atheists to battle.
Yeah, I mean they always talk about leading astray, leading others astray, and then back in the Bible, it even says, like, if you have a family member who's worshiping other gods and causing other people to go astray, you're supposed to kill them all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, death sentence is the sentence for pretty much everything in the Bible, but especially that, where it's following other gods and encouraging other people to follow gods is, something you're supposed to actively seek them down and kill them for doing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of funny because in the Old Testament you also have Israel going worshiping other gods every time.
Oh yeah, and building idols and statues.
Right, and it's especially funny in I think in Ezekiel where they explicitly mention the Inanna cult, where women were practicing a ritual for the Inanna cult in the temple, in the main temple of Jerusalem. And Inanna was the oldest dying and rising god we know of.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that story was clearly known hundreds of years before Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's especially funny when you have like first century Christian texts that look a lot like what the Inanna cult was teaching. But anyway, back to the book. I just want to wrap that up real quick. I mean, I think it's a decent book as far as wanting to kind of push activists. I think it's very much a book for activists. It's not it's not there to say refute Christianity or like quite a few of the books are, which is what I kind of appreciate about it. It's not just another counter apologetics books. It's more like for those who want to get into activism or to defend being an atheist activist. Although the only thing I can criticize about it, I think they needed to maybe a little bit more advice as to what the individual person can do, as far as how to be an effective activist. I think there's a lot of little things that we can do what we do with our individual tables or contacting our politicians. I've often said sometimes, there's all these bloggers, these atheist bloggers out there that they do a lot of good, but I think what can be more effective than being a blogger is writing letters to the editor.
Mm-hmm. That's peaceful use of your time.
Yeah.
You're not going out committing crimes. You're not advocating violence
Right.
or anything. You're advocating communication.
Right, and that's the thing. Is like whenever somebody puts up a religious letter in my local paper, I'll usually write a response to it, telling them everything that's wrong with what they just said. And I think that's important because you could write 100 blog posts and nobody reads them.
No.
But people read letters to the editor, and I think they're it's an effective way to get across. And then usually almost all of my letters have been published because I think editors do want to get a discussion going. They like
a little bit of controversy.
Oh yeah, they love controversy. And actually, that's one thing that David Silverman was saying in his book was, in some of their sometimes they'll do press releases for billboards, and like for billboards, really the press is their main target. And they'll take a picture, they'll give a press release, and they're like, make sure your press release is perfectly written, because oftentimes journalists are lazy. If you write a press report where they can just put it straight in their paper just how you wrote it, they will do that. And he said that quite a few times they've been able to do that, where they essentially write the story for them and say, "Here, print this," and the paper's like, "Thank you."
Yep, I'll do that.
Okay. All right, we got to wrap up here. Be sure to join us on the next show, which is the 26th. We'll be having discussion about Thomas Paine in celebration of Thomas Paine Day. So it should be a fun episode.
If it's not fun, we'll make it fun. So
How
tune in.
how can an episode about Thomas Paine not be fun? But see you next time.
Bye.